Welcome back to another study on the days of Noah, Part 5, Amalgamation, Evidence of a Flood. One of the biggest, one debated Bible topic is this Noah's flood. Did it actually occur? Most scientists will come up with all sorts of reasoning and rationale. Why is it that a flood could not, or a worldwide flood did not take place? Obviously, they would want to deny this because if a flood did take place as the Bible said it did, then it would mean that there is an accountability, meaning that sometime in the near future, all of us will have to answer for all the things done in the body. So people will make up all sorts of reasoning, like even though they would find buildings deep under the water, they would come up with all sorts of reasoning to say, well, this is natural, this doesn't exist, all to make themselves feel comfortable in the position that they are in. But whether we believe or not, the reality is there is a God, and He requires obedience from us. And one of the reason we know this is because of the days of Noah dealing with the flood. But before we go any further into this, looking at is there evidence of a flood still in existence today? Because we talked about a whole lot of stuff about the antediluvian, all of the scientific stuff these guys were doing. But was there a flood? And do we have evidence existing today to prove that there is a flood? But before we get into that, as we said, let us start off in prayer. Our Father, we give you thanks for allowing us to study your word once again. I pray that you would open up your people's mind so that they may allow you to speak to them. This is our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen. One of the big issues some may have regarding what we covered is, why don't we have any evidence of all the accomplishments of the antediluvians? Based on what we covered in the last study, all those dinosaurs are evidence of their existence. I guess the question you may have, where are books or tablets showing their writings? If these people were turning chicken into T-Rex and turkeys into Triceratops, if they were writing on things, it wouldn't be on paper or stone. As we do not, with our modern technology, use I shouldn't say we're using papers anymore, but we're trying to move away from it. And if these people were this far as it relates to the medical field, we could only imagine the other set of technology these people had. But if we don't decide to write on paper or rock anymore, I would assume that these people had the same sorts of technology also. But remember, they didn't, and then the next thing we have to consider as to why is it that they probably didn't write on stones too much, or I'll say stones because the paper would have been destroyed with the water. One of the reasons I believe that they may not have carved too much on stone is because they didn't believe in the flood. When Noah preached for those 100+ years, these people didn't believe that there were a flood. If they did believe, I believe that they would have gone on the ark when Noah went on. The fact that they didn't go on the ark showed that they didn't believe. And if they didn't believe, then there will be no need for self-preservation. And by self-preservation, I mean carving stuff into stone to show that they actually did exist. Our first reading is coming from Genesis chapter 6, verse 13 and onwards, and we're going to skip some verses. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. Make thee an ark of gopher wood, room shalt thou make in the ark, and shall pitch it within and without. And this is the fashion which thou shalt make it of. The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits, the breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits. Verse 16, a window shalt thou make to the ark, and in a cubit shalt thou finish it above. And the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof with lower second, and third stories thou shalt make it. Verse 17. And behold, I, even I, do bring a flood of waters upon the earth to destroy all flesh, wherein is the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die. Thus did Noah according to all the commandment that all God commanded him, so did he. Verse 17 is very crucial. Verse 17 says that there is a world, or there will be a worldwide flood, and everybody or every breathing being, this could be animal and human, if they were not on the ark or found on the ark, they would all be destroyed by the flood. So the fact that only Noah and his sons and all their wives went in on the ark shows that they were the only people that believe in the coming of the worldwide flood, which is a reason why I believe that these people did not write on stones. There is a worldwide flood, according to what we just read. Is there evidence of such an event taking place? Here is an artist's rendition of the Tower of Babel. And as we start to read about the history of the Tower of Babel, then we'll understand why is the Tower of Babel a symbol or an evidence for a worldwide flood. In the Express newspaper published Wednesday, August 4, 2021 by Joel Day, he writes, archaeologists astounded by tablet that revealed first ever image of Tower of Babel. So here have archaeologists were astounded as being given unfettered access to a previously unseen site that revealed the first ever image of the Tower of Babel. The tower remains one of the most mysterious stories contained in the Bible. For years, whether or not the tower was a real physical thing was open for discussion. Many believe it was simply symbolic, acting as a message to the Bible dedicated followers. Others claim it was merely folklore or legend. The fragile remains of the ancient city of Babylon in modern-day Iraq have revealed many secrets, the greatest of all, the discovery of a vast structure which ancient records suggest the Tower of Babel. These texts, as well as others found all around the Middle East where Christianity originated, have given scholars some idea of what the building might have looked like. Yet, none have given researchers a clear outline or description bound in solid imagery. Things changed in 2017 when academics were given access to privately owned tablets. The artifact was explored during the Smithsonian Channel documentary Secrets Tower of Babel. Here, the narrator said, inscribed on the tablet is an image that sensationally revealed exactly what the Tower of Babel looked like. Dr. Andrew George, an expert in ancient texts, at the SOAS University of London, this is a very strong piece of evidence that the Tower of Babel story in the Bible was inspired by this real building. As we can see, the location of where they believe the Tower of Babel actually existed when it was built many years ago. This is a picture of the tablet that the Smithsonian that Mr. George or Dr. George was using to say that the Tower of Babel is actually real. The remarkable tablet, which had never been filmed before, dates to the 6th century BCE and was discovered in Babylon over a century ago. Yet, no one had realized how important it was until Professor George was given the slab and went on to decipher the inscription. He explained, at the top part there is a relief depicting a step tower, and there a great figure of a human being carrying a staff with a conical hat. This is a picture of that same tablet we saw earlier. The only thing is they highlighted the lines so that we'll be able to tell the difference between regular rock erosion and that which is carved out. But as you can see, the man with the staff and the conical hat, almost similar to that of the Roman pontiffs. And then the thing that looks like a multi-tier cake is image that represent what they believe, or the carving represents what the Tower of Babel looked like. Below that relief in the text, which had been chiseled into the monument, and the label is easily read, it reads the Temple Tower of the City of Babylon. As the narrator noted, this tablet provides the first ever image of the real Tower of Babel. It confirms the building was a Mesopotamian step tower and illustrates the 7 tiers of the ancient megastructure. Significantly, it also clearly identifies the man behind it, Mesopotamia's most famous ruler, King Nebuchadnezzar II. While the images are extraordinary, the tablet's ancient texts also reveal a detailed account of the tower's construction, and more importantly, it goes on to tell how Nebuchadnezzar went about building it. Professor George translated the text of the documentary and said it reads from the upper sea, which is the Mediterranean, to the lower sea, and that's the Persian Gulf, the far-flung lands and teeming people of the inhabitations I mobilized in order to construct this building of this ziggurat of Babylon. The ancient account is identical to the biblical story of how the Tower of Babel was constructed. For scholars, the tablet offers further proof that the tower wasn't just a work of fiction, but an actual building from antiquity. What is significant of the Tower of Babel? The builders wanted its height to reach to the heavens. The floods were 15 cubits above the tallest mountain. If their building reached higher than 15 cubits above the highest mountain, then if another flood would have came, the only thing the people would have had to do was climb to the top stories where the water would have been much lower. So this is why I believe they built the Tower of Babel. Genesis chapter 11 verse 3 to 7, which will give us a little understanding why the Tower of Babel was built. It reads, "And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick, and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, Go to, let us build us a city, and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." Now we're going to come back to that scattered abroad because it has a very interesting meaning. Verse 6, "And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they all have one language, and this they begin to do. Now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and therefore confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." So what does that scattered abroad means? It has a primitive root, and it means to dash in pieces. Now, normally when you read the Old Testament, when it talks about being dashed in pieces, it means to be cut up in pieces or to be put to death. If you go on, it says literally or figuratively, especially to disperse, but it means to break, dash, shake into pieces, cast abroad, disperse, drive, retire, scattered abroad, spread abroad. So the people after the flood that built the tower, they were afraid of being destroyed. At this juncture, God confused the language. This is the first proof of a flood besides what is recorded in the scriptures. Notice these carvings of an account of the flood. But before we even move on to that picture, what is clear is these people want to build a tower that went up to the heavens, and the reason why they said to make a name for themselves and so that they won't be scatter. And as we can see, to scatter means to dash in pieces, and then it also has a figurative meaning to scatter abroad. This is a Sumerian flood story tablet, and the next couple slides will actually be showing the image of a flood. And scientists tend to say that these happened before the flood of Noah, and as a result of it, they believe that Noah's flood is a copy of the Sumerian, description of a worldwide flood. I shouldn't say a worldwide flood, but a large flood, because scientists don't believe that there were a worldwide flood. Here is another carving. In this particular carving, you can see that the water is up, and you can have people swimming, holding stuff in their hands. You can also see a horse right here. So this is an image or depiction of a flood that took place, and people were trying to swim for safety. These are photos of the Great Flood carving and engraving. Historians make these seem as if Noah's flood and the Great Flood were two different events. But I honestly believe that each one of these different pictures were different countries or different tribes' view of the past flood. Now, some people carved it on walls, tablets, and pottery, but the Chinese placed the story of the flood in their written text. When you go to Armstrong Institute of Biblical Archaeology, they have an interesting article on the Chinese word for large boat or ship. This was printed October 22nd, 2021, so it's recent, and this is by Christopher Eames. Finding evidence of Noah flood in the single Chinese word. Sometimes the problem with looking for something is that we can't see the forest for the trees. Indeed, it may be found in the tiniest of objects, such as a single Chinese word. The character-based Chinese language goes back at least as far as 1250 BCE, as recorded on bones and bronze artifacts. The squarish Chinese characters can become quite complex, made up of several radicals, simple individual words with individual meaning packed together to create a new word or character. One such example is the Chinese word for ship or large boat. This word made up of three parts. The first one we can see, this one right here, is 8. This one here means mouth, or they translate it as persons also. And then this section right here means boat, or it is equal to ship. And obviously, when we talk about ship, we're talking about large ships. The drawing at the left literally translates 8-person boat. It's remarkable parallel to the biblical story of the great ark that housed 8 persons. Perhaps like me, your first thought is wondering if it's simply the result from the influence of missionaries or such over the last several centuries. It is not. The word has been found dating to at least as early as 700 BCE. So what they're trying to say is missionaries would have came after Christ. But 700 BCE, the Chinese already had the word 8-person boat as a description of large boat or ships. So what they're saying is that the Chinese language already had this description of large boat or ship before the missionary comes. Continuing on, then perhaps it's just coincide that the ancient Chinese word for ship is a pastiche of words paralleling the story of the legendary ship Noah's Ark. Now, what's interesting about languages like Chinese and the French and the Germans, they tend to change their language very little. They don't allow what is going on around them to have a big impact on their language. And I believe, from what I've heard about the Chinese writing and their language, they can probably date their writings as far back as the Tower of Babel. So that is how old their language is, as compared to the English language, which is practically a modern or a new language. So besides language that have built into some words records of a flood, there are undersea cities and monuments, some at our back door. This picture of a diver around the Bimini Road or wall, depending on who you speak with, some believe that these stones make a road. Others have concluded that these are the top layers of a wall. Now, I was wondering why that persons would build a wall, and I don't believe the flood just happened like, boom, the water just got extremely high. I think it happened over a period of time, and it is possible that persons or the antediluvian who probably lived on the island of Bimini or on the same land would have probably built this stone wall thinking that, they want to build some barrier up to prevent the water from getting too high. Like how we would build sand structures around, or dams, man-made dams around certain areas in order to keep out water. It's possible that is what they were attempting to do. But it also can be a road. But they claim that in some places you can see stones beneath the rocks at the surface. Other scientists say there is not enough evidence to conclusively state that this is a man-made road or gate. They believe what you're seeing here, all of those rocks almost perfectly aligned, all of them almost have the same basic shape. They believe that they are not man-made, but that they are, natural occurring stones that have been worn down the seam. Point is, we have a feature that is a half a mile long that curves at one point. The stones appear uniform, as we can see in the picture. Then we have the underwater monument in Japan. And some scientists, and we're going to look at the underwater monument in Japan. And it's a building, and when you read books like Patriarch and Prophet, which talks about how Adam was a giant, you'll understand why is it that the steps appear to be so big. But even looking at the Japanese monument or the monument near Japan, even this they try to explain to be natural. So here is a picture of the Unagoni monument of Japan, and this is a picture of what could be a step. Here is a picture of a sculpture of a turtle. This is a picture of the same turtle, except they're looking at above as opposed to looking at it from a lower angle. This is a 3D map of the complete monument after they would have digitally placed the whole site together. I believe this site, among others still visible today, were buildings of Seth's children and not Cain. Now you may ask, well, why is it that I believe that these are buildings of Seth's children or Seth's descendant as opposed to Cain? And you read in Patriarchs and Prophets, it talks about how Cain's descendants remain in the valley while Seth's children remain in the mountains. Now, before the flood, there wasn't as much water on the earth. So the ocean floor of today would have been the valley of the times of the antediluvian or the times before the flood. So think about it, standing 2 miles below on the ocean floor with the majority of it removed, and I'm talking about the majority of it removed, I'm speaking about the water, would make the 7 continents to look like mountains. This would include all areas above sea level now. These are simply my hypothesis. But North America, South America, if you're like 2 miles in the valley, when you look up, these continents would have looked like, in my view or my humble opinion, mountains. Now let's talk about the steps that we saw a bit earlier. Now, this person made a drawing where they place Adam about 15 feet. I think when you read about patriarchs and prophet, I can't remember the exact wording, but Adam was somewhere between 15 to 20 feet, and Eve was about shoulder level shorter than him. So Eve would have caught him somewhere between his shoulder neck area or lower neck area. Now, if you were to compare the 6-foot man and woman, you'll notice that the man was just a little bit taller than Adam's knees. Now that's if he's 15 feet. Now if Adam was about 17 to 20 feet, or just like 2 to 3 feet taller, then obviously the man would have been equal to Adam's knee or a little bit lower. And all of these are just approximates. Now, looking at this picture, you can see that this particular diver is just a little bit taller than each step. So if Adam was between 15 to 20 feet tall, you can understand why the steps are big in comparison to the diver. When you read Encyclopedia Britannica, they have this to say regarding the Yonaguni monument. They write, underwater rock structure that was discovered in the 1980s near Yonaguni Island, Japan. While some believe the ziggurat-like formation is from an ancient city, others argue that was naturally created. So even though there are doors, there are pools, people still come to the conclusion that these are natural. Now, what's so interesting is there's probably only one type of the Yonaguni monument. And my thing is, if there is one version of it underwater and it's natural, I believe we should see this in multiple places, not just one. But anyway, the rectangular monument, which was first detected by a scuba diver, is more than 160 feet long and some 60 feet wide. A number of scholars have visited the site, but its origin remains uncertain. According to some, the monument is a man-made shaped pyramid. In addition to many straight lines, some of the rocks purportedly have carvings. Nearby are other formations suggesting a submerged ancient city. This theory contends that the structure are at least 5,000 years old and belongs to a lost civilization, possibly the legendary Mu or Lemuria. But pay close attention to that. The Yonaguni, based on their calculation, they believe is some 5,000 years old. Now let's come back closer to home. We talked about the Bimini Road or the Bimini Wall. Now let's look at the sunken pyramids discovered off the coast of Cuba. Might be lost city of Atlantis, archaeologists say. And this is not that old. This document was published January 3rd, 2021 by the Virgin Free Press. It says the remains of what may be a 6,000-year-old immersed in a deep water off the west coast of Cuba was discovered by a team of Canadian and Cuban researchers. Offshore engineer Paulina Zaletsky and her husband Paul Weiswick and her son Ernesto Tapinis used sophisticated sonar and videotaped devices to find some kind of megalith you'd find on Stonehenge or Easter Island. Some structures within the complex may be as long as 400 meters wide and as high as 40 meters, he said. Some are sitting on top of each other. They show very distinct shapes and symmetrical design of a non-natural kind. We've shown them to scientists in Cuba, the US, and elsewhere, and nobody has suggested that they are natural. Here is a sonar picture of the pyramids that are off the coast of Cuba that are deep underwater. So as you can see, they do look like pyramids. Where did this water come from? In the old days, like the 16, 17, or 1800, if you would make a story about, or if you were to tell the story about Noah, many of them would probably disbelieve. And the reason why they probably would disbelieve is they would ask the question, well, if all of that water didn't exist above the earth crust, or as we can see it today, then where did all the water come from? I'm looking at Brookhaven National Laboratory, new evidence for oceans of water deep in Earth. Water bound in mantle rock alters our view of the Earth's composition. June 13, 2014. And you can contact Karen McNulty Walsh or Peter Genza dealing with this particular document. Schematic cross-section of the Earth's interior. The study of Steve Jacobson and Brandon Schmant used seismic waves to find magma generated at the base of the transition zone around 410 miles deep. Dehydration, melting at those conditions, also observed in the study high-pressure experiment, suggests that the transition zone may contain oceans worth of H2O dissolved in high-pressure rock. The finding alters previous assumption about the Earth's composition. So, is there evidence for a flood? The scientists discovered ocean worth of H2O, and there were other places that I would have read about a couple of years ago where scientists found water almost the size of the Arctic Ocean in the Earth's crust. So there are sufficient information for me to believe a flood took place. The point of this series was to point out that the experiments being conducted today are similar to those in the past, like talking about the days before Noah's flood, suggesting that we have reached the days of Noah and Lot. Therefore, continue to look up, for the day of Christ's appearing is nearer than when we first believed.